everyone. Thank you for being here. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about non monogamy and more specifically, trying at least beginning to start to think about and hopefully get to answering the question, is non monogamy for me? So I imagine you are here because you, for whatever reason, are curious about non monogamy, or either you're maybe have already started exploring non-monogamy, maybe you're in a relationship and thinking about opening up your relationship. For whatever reasons that you're here, this question might land with you of, is non-monogamy for me? And how do you even begin to think about that question? How do you even begin to answer that question? So I'm hoping that you will be able to use the reflection questions that I'm going to share with you today, to begin to just take a look inward and, think about different dynamics and different parts of yourself and what you're looking for, what you want to experience, what your values are, and using those questions to kind of help you to get to some kind of answer. My thoughts are that a lot of times, either based out of excitement or based out of fear, we focus a lot on the details and the dynamics and the structures and the who's involved and the when and where and all of this stuff, which again can bring up a lot of excitement for us, and so we want to jump right into that. Or it can bring up a lot of fears for us, and a lot of anxiety and hesitation, and so that's kind of our obsession. But I'm hoping that kind of slowing things down a little bit, I like to think about it more so as not a question of like, what is my capacity or not, or like what are the things, like the to-dos or the experiences are to be had, or what I already know or don't know. I really like to kind of focus it in and hone in on who am I and who can I become, and because we change, right? And how can either monogamy, non-monogamy, my relationships in general, or how I approach my relationships support this, and affirm who I am. So I think that will help to simplify the process at least a little bit for you, so that all of the chatter, whether it's your own chatter or chatter outside of you, can kind of quiet a little bit, and you can focus on what you want, but not just what you want, but like who you are, because that's going to kind of remain somewhat the constant. Aside from the change that naturally happens, that's going to remain kind of the constant that goes along with you no matter what dynamic you choose, no matter who you're with, and when. So, all right, getting on to it, that's a little bit about what we're going to kind of explore here and just how we're going to explore it. I really like for things to be interactive and for it to be somewhat experiential. And so, I can offer some information, I can offer some suggestions and these reflection questions, but I think that kind of experiencing it and really taking the time to think about it, and me being here in the moment with you, can be really helpful. So I really want to take advantage of that to the extent that we can here. So I invite you to use the chat section if you want to share any questions, or if you want to share any thoughts or reflections that you have in the present time as we're going through this. So feel free, don't hesitate to use the chat section. I'm going to actually try to figure out how to use the chat section, so hopefully I don't miss anything. And I'm going to ask some reflection questions, and if you have a journal, or you can use your phone, or just kind of think about it on your own, to just, I'm going to leave a little bit of time in between the questions for you to kind of start to jot down some answers for yourself. And hopefully this can kind of get your juices flowing, and get you thinking about other things and different questions for yourself. So again, please feel free to use the chat section. And I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. So first of all, who I am, I'm Melissa Lesane. You did pronounce that correctly. Thank you so much. And I am a marriage and family therapist, and I work in a private practice called Los Angeles Sex Therapy in Los Angeles. And we do sex therapy And also, my particular specialty and excitement is non-monogamy, of course, and exploring non-monogamy. And especially excited to work with brown and black folks in and exploring non-monogamy and like really honing in on their experiences. So, what else? I personally am non-monogamous, so I really like to share that. And if you have any questions, about that, please feel free. I'm kind of an open book. But I say that and I share that because I really am passionate about it. Not just from kind of a therapeutic, supportive, place, but also from a very personal place. I am involved in these communities. These are, my communities as well. And I have firsthand the experience of what it is like to not know, what it's like to explore, what it's like to be scared, what it's like to be confused, what it's like to be really excited. So and I really, these questions come from a personal space and personal experiences, and from the community and the people that I work with as well, that seem to kind of be common questions. So but just to let's just hop right in. Again, if anything, if you have any questions, curiosities, please feel free to use the chat section. So I want to test out the chat section and see. I wanted to ask you all, who is familiar with non-monogamy? I mean, I assume that you're here because you know something about it, and you at least have heard the word, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you've heard monogamy and you're like, "What the heck is non-monogamy?" So, if anybody feels comfortable enough, if you're brave enough to kind of give a shot at like who sharing who's familiar with non-monogamy, what is non-monogamy, if you have an example of it or a description that you might want to share. Let's see. Okay, I think okay, I think I found the chat section. So yeah, can anybody let me know that you're here and that you could hear me and you're listening? All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. It's kind of weird to be just a little, real talk. It's kind of weird to, a little bit strange to be talking, and I'm like, I have no idea if anybody's here listening to me or hearing. So I really, really appreciate that feedback. Thank you. So somebody says here, I'm familiar with the term, but want to know more about finding out if it's the dynamic that works for me. Perfect. You're in the right place. All right, awesome. So, well, I'll just share a little bit. So non-monogamy, I really want to try to share it in a very simplified way, and it might even be a little too simplified, but I think it's a great starting point. And I like to think about monogamy as kind of being synonymous to being exclusive or to one at a time, or kind of this concept of like one at a time. And that can be in dating, that can be sexually, that can be relationally, that can be intimately. But just kind of this idea of focusing on one person, one partner, one connection at a time. And non-monogamy, I guess, would kind of be the opposite of that, like more than one at a time, either the practice of or the capacity for, the interest or desire to be open to more than one at a time, not limiting yourself to one at a time. So that can be, again, sexually, relationally, spiritually, it can be, intimately and whatnot. We kind of already have this concept, practice this concept with our friendships, where like well, maybe some people have like one really good friend or a best friend, but like we don't necessarily limit ourselves to the connections that we have with our friends. Very often, and it's common that we can engage in with multiple people as our friends and have different types of relationships and different levels of intimacy with them. And so similarly, the concept goes, is true for people who are curious about or who connect with the idea of non-monogamy, that I want to be open to how connections and how relationships can play out and not limit myself to one connection at a time or one person at a time. And that can be relationally, that can be sexually. So if there's any questions on that, if I can, kind of elaborate on that a little bit more, please let me know. But just to kind of share some examples, I think a lot of us, whether or not we are familiar with the term non-monogamy, might be more familiar with terms like open relationships, don't ask, don't tell, situationships. We might be more familiar with swinging or polyamory, polygamy. So these are kind of all, or relationship anarchy. These are kind of all examples of non-monogamy. Non-monogamy is kind of an umbrella term. An umbrella term for different types and dynamics and ways that people can practice non-monogamy. And they're all kind of have their unique points to them, maybe even have their own communities and spaces, but essentially just kind of share that more broader concept of, more than one at a time, or being open to more than one partner or connection at a time. So all right, what else? Let me just check my notes here, because that's what I like to do when I present, so I'm not scattered all over the place. So I just wanted to share a little bit about myself really quick too, in kind of warming us up for these reflection questions. So I'm married, and I have been in my relationship for 18 years, and since I was 18. And we've kind of started out non-monogamous from the very beginning, from day one. And our experiences started out within the swinging community, and from there we kind of evolved and changed, and just based on our experiences in the swinging community, we started to kind of open ourselves up and get to know more about polyamory. And within the swinging community, there tends to be, I guess the generalization is kind of more of a focus, or just kind of intentions around sexual connections, or casual connections. And so, but over time, we kind of expanded ourselves and started learning more and meeting different people, and really also enjoying the connections, the intimate connections that we were creating amongst our friends within the swinging community. And we're interested in like just being more intimate in general. Our families would hang out, and so we were like, we were introduced to polyamory, which tends to kind of have an additional focus like on intimacy and romance, and deep intimate or romantic connections, emotional connections. And so our dynamic started to kind of shift and open up to more of that as well with other people. And sometimes we would experience things together or meet people together, and sometimes individually. So that's just a little bit about my background. And for me, I think I really value the freedom, just kind of the freedom and the options and the choices to really just be who I am. Again, the questions were inspired by like who we are, but just to be who I am, and the ever kind of evolving parts of me as well, and having the space and the opportunity to explore those things, and to have open conversations about it. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Let's see. So again, for whatever reason that you're here, whether you're just kind of like, what is this non-monogamy thing? This is a strange word, or I really want to know, how it can work for me, or, I'm kind of already starting to figure this thing out, but I could use some help. Let's get into the reflection questions. Okay, so I actually put a little PowerPoint together for the reflection questions, because I'm a visual learner as well, and in case it helps you all, you can have these available to look at as I go through them. And let's see. I might miss your chat questions, but hopefully not. Oops, wrong one. Okay. So here we go. Hope you can see that. I'll keep an eye out on the chat here. But so helpful reflections for your consideration. I'm going to start off with this question right here. And again, if you have a journal, if you're using your phone, or you're just kind of listening and kind of, thinking things out in your own mind, I really do welcome you to start to think about what your answer would be to this. And I know you're not going to have enough time to like really give a well thought out answer, but whatever kind of comes up first. And then we will have opportunity later to share if anybody feels like they want to share. I think it can be really helpful. Hearing from me is great, but hearing from each other and all of us kind of adding to the pot and to the collective of ideas and experiences, I think would be really helpful. So the first question I want to share with you is, what is your definition of non-monogamy? And I kind of asked that question already. So just again, reiterating on that, what is your definition of non-monogamy? What's your understanding of non-monogamy? What is it for you? How would you describe it? And I'm going to give about a minute for each question. I'm going to elaborate a little bit on it, and hopefully on your end, you're starting to, jot down some answers to this. And if you feel just really excited about an answer and you want to share it in the chat in the moment, feel free to do that, or else we can wait till the end. But yeah, so I'll give kind of 30 more seconds, but just what does it mean to you? What have you already heard? What do you know about it? Kind of what are some of the, stereotypes that you know? But just most importantly, what does it mean to you? When you're asking yourself or you're considering non-monogamy, what is it exactly that you're considering? And getting really clear on that. And if you don't know, maybe writing down some questions for yourself that might help you to get more clear on that. All right. So, wow, how did I end up there? Okay. The next question is, what has been your experience with non-monogamy so far, if anything at all? And again, I'll give you a minute for each question, but I share it in this way. If I said, what has it been already? Either you already have experience with non-monogamy to some extent, whether it's in the professional setting, or from your past experiences or relationships, or just kind of exploring, or maybe having been interested in the past and researching it or something like that. Whatever the extent, what has been your experience so far? Before I kind of knew that I was non-monogamous, and when I met my husband at the time, I didn't even know what that word was. And I didn't even know that I was non-monogamous. Again, I didn't really know. I just thought I was having a good time and that I was having experiences. I was like, oh yeah, I'm fun. I'm solid in my relationship and I'm a freak, and I'm just having a good time. So, but it wasn't until I met somebody, who kind of gave me this term for it. I was like, oh, that's what this thing is. Okay, cool. So I wasn't really able to give a definition or knowing of the word, but I already had some kind of experiences where a past relationship, an ex of mine, we explored within our sexuality and explored with other people. So yeah, I had already kind of had experience, even though I didn't know I did. All right, so the next question is, what are or have been the benefits and challenges in monogamy for you? So I think what could be helpful when considering non-monogamy for yourself is considering or reflecting on monogamy, especially if you aren't really familiar with non-monogamy, or if you don't have a whole lot of experience with non-monogamy. I think kind of reflecting on what you do have experience with and how that has been for you. Are there particular benefits of monogamy for you? I'm trying to think of a particular benefit of monogamy. Not say I don't have one, um, but like I don't know. It just feels right to you. Like, and that's the thing too. Like, we don't have to have these like deep, intellectual or whatever deep reasons that like something works for us. I think that it's okay to be like, I don't know, it just kind of feels right. Like, that's just what feels good to me. It's okay to be there. Or maybe, there are particular challenges that kind of stick out for you, around monogamy, around having been, in a relationship and with one person and one person at a time. And I know for me, like, I experienced a lot of shame, just the simple fact of like being attracted to somebody at one point in my life. You know what I mean? Like, being attracted to somebody other than my partner at the time. I had this idea of like loyalty, and that loyalty was really important to me at the time in my relationships. Like, no matter what, I had to kind of like really rigid. I had like really rigid rules for myself that I had to like contain my attraction, contain my desires, contain my interests, to interact with other people. Um, and at that time, I guess for a moment it worked for me, and then there was like also this part that wasn't feeling like it really worked for me. And today, like, I really value the freedom for that. So, okay. Let's see, I'm gonna just check the chats just in case. Okay. So the next question is, what are or have been challenges in relationships in general for you? So the first questions were about monogamy, non-monogamy. This is just like, just in general, like what might be some challenges for you in your relationship. And why I bring this up is because I think it could be information. I think it could be data, that may or may not have anything to do with the dynamic of your relationship, with monogamy, with non-monogamy. I think that, sometimes it's very easy to kind of like personalize our challenges and like, oh, this is a problem with me, and this is a great opportunity to kind of explore those, and the things that maybe we think are a problem with me personally versus, maybe the dynamic of our relationship, maybe sorry, I'm blanking on a word, but the power dynamics of our relationship, or the agreements within our relationship, or whatever. So kind of generally, what have been challenges for you? I'm going to check the chat section. What do you do if you feel like you don't have the language to answer some of these questions? Thank you so much for asking that. First, I would kind of like to check in with you and ask you, do you feel like the language that I'm using might be particularly challenging for you to answer these questions, or to understand the questions, or to connect with the questions that I'm asking? So that's the first thing. Let me know that. The second thing is, do your best, like, if you're feeling like you have an answer, I mean, just do your best to try to describe it, and use the words that you do know, and don't maybe get caught up too much on the words or the language. But yeah, if that helps, let me know. I'm just curious, particularly like how you're getting, maybe feeling stuck, if at all, with the language. So let me know if that helps. But just do your best to kind of answer the questions the best that you can. Yeah, let me know if that helps. If we need kind of more personal, one-on-one, you can contact me later, and I can maybe try to help you out with that. All right. So the next question is, what's your relationship with pleasure? Not just sexual pleasure, but just in general. What's your relationship with pleasure in general? And why I ask this question, why I think this is a good question to kind of explore for yourself, is because, I think whether it's monogamy or non-monogamy, I think generally there should be, and often is not, a conversation about what brings us pleasure. And I think more deep into it, we can start talking about like what interests we have or desires, fantasies that are maybe more sensual, sexual, romantic, intimate, kinky. But also, I think even before getting to kind of those parts, just like what's your relationship with pleasure in general? Like, are you able to, do you feel like you're open to exploring pleasure, to receiving pleasure, to experiencing pleasure in your life? Is that something that is important to you? And how do you go about doing that? And how does that, whether you do or don't, however, whatever your relationship with pleasure is, like, how do you think that that might be, that might impact your relationships or impact how you show up in your relationships? Um, so yeah, that's the next question. Also, as I was talking, I was thinking, I know this is moving kind of fast. If um, if if anybody is benefiting from these questions in the moment, like you're going through and jotting down some answers, but maybe it could help to slow things down, please let me know. Like, I would love some feedback that would really help me to kind of making sure that this presentation here is like bringing value to you. So if I'm moving too fast for anybody, let me know. Um, Also, I notice I'm kind of talking over as I'm sharing the questions just so that we're not in silence, but also maybe silence could be really helpful. So just want to put that out there. All right, the next question is, how important is it to you that who you are, what your values are, and what your desires are affirmed in your relationship? So let me kind of say that in a more simple way too. But like, starting to think about who you are, and I know that's a big question, but just generally who you are, like what you're interested in, what your personality is like where you come from, all of these things, your identities, like just who you are, what your values are, what's important to you in life, like what guides you in life, and what your desires are. And that's again broad and can, definitely includes sexual, romantic, erotic, intimate, but just in general, like, and how important is all of that? Like, all of that, how it's important that those are affirmed, that those are accepted, that those are welcomed, that those are supported, in your relationships. I'm gonna take a pause here for a second. Also, if you haven't noticed, again, these questions aren't super specific on the details of like sex, of romance, of intimacy, and so I'm sorry if you were coming here for those questions. Don't want to disappoint. But I think that just as a reminder, excuse me, that I think that it is really helpful to kind of focus on ourselves, focus on you, who you are again, and what you want, because I think these are the things, these are the reasons why, non-monogamy, at least for me, has really worked out, right? Because it's like, that's what fits me, that's what fits my goals in life, that's what fits my values in life. Like, I desire, you know I desire, like, I really value meeting people and connecting with them and being flirty and impacting people and them and being impacted by people. And just over time and in my life, I like really feel like it really feels really, really important to me to be able to have a lot of space to do that. And sometimes that might lead to more intimate connections. And sometimes that might lead to maybe not necessarily romance or sexual connections or relationships, but like, I don't know, wanting to spend time with somebody. Like, this person and I really share this interest and we're really passionate about this thing. And maybe my partner isn't so much, and I would love to have the space. Actually, one really life example is I don't really like scary movies, and this is like a very basic simple example, but like I don't really like scary movies. My husband does, and that was just like one area where non-monogamy has benefited us. And you don't have to be non-monogamous, to experience this, but it just benefited us because I was like, yeah, go find somebody else who enjoys scary movies, because I'm not showing up. Like, I don't want to, be in bed all night, like thinking about how I'm gonna get got or something like that. So anyway, that's a small little example. All right, back to the questions, reflection questions. Um, how well do you know yourself? How well do you know who you are, your values, and your desires? So there's a lot of questions on this page. It's okay, don't feel overwhelmed by them. I just kind of want to share them with you. But the first one is like, how important is it for who you are, your values, and your desires to be affirmed in your relationships? This question is, how well, just kind of a check-in, like how well do you feel that you even know who you are, what your values are, and what your desires are, right? And those are some really, really deep questions. Like, they are, I get it. They're big questions that you might not have answers to, and that is okay. Um, you know, it can just get you to begin to think about what you want and how maybe non-monogamy can help you get what you want, or maybe how non-monogamy just isn't for you. So the other question is, do you know specifically what values, desires, and things about you that you want to make sure that when you're in a relationship with, if you're considering non-monogamy, if you're considering monogamy, like, I want to make sure that these things, that there's space for these parts, in my relationships. At one point, just to share again some personal anecdotes here, like when I met my husband, I was still exploring my own sexuality, and I didn't have a lot of experience with that. I had a little bit of it, but I still was really very interested and still trying to figure things out for myself. Like, what does that mean to me? What am I attracted to? Who am I attracted to? Like, what things excite me, and how do I feel around different people? And that was something that was really, really, really important for me in the start of that relationship, that there was space for that, and that I was able to continue to explore that for myself. And what are they? The next question is, let's check time. All right, the next question is, does your current relationship or relationships reflect this if you're in a relationship? So I kind of gave an example about the relationship that I was entering, and making sure that that's what was possible. And then, as I'm in the relationship, that, I'm checking in and at least having the space to communicate, to share, to say, to really own and be myself and say, these are the things that are important to me. How can this relationship support that? All right. So, next question. Does the idea and potential of monogamy feel supportive and affirming for all of these things for you? So if you were able to identify some values, or when you are able to identify some values, if and when you were able to identify desires for yourself, things that are still really important to you in terms of your pleasure and things that you're interested in and fantasies that you may have, like, or just kind of who you are and what your personality is, and like you're a flirtatious person, and you really want to have space for that in your relationships. How does the potential of monogamy feel supportive and affirming for those things? does the potential and idea of non-monogamy feel supportive and affirming of those things? And if we had more time, I would really get into like, again, it's really not about monogamy or non-monogamy. I think that there's just a lot of space in between. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's just knowing these things, like knowing all of these different parts about your sexuality, about your identities, about your profession, about your personality, about, your, I don't know, your lifestyle and the things that you need. Like knowing these things and saying, like, these are things that are important to me. How can we make them? But, let's hone in more specifically on connections, because I think that is a big part of non monogamy as well. Because I don't want to shy away from that either. I think that's a big part that most people, or a lot of people, are kind of really interested in and curious about is the space and the conversation for, how can this fit in my life, whether you're have a partner or partners or not. What do you want that to look like for yourself? Okay, how do you feel non-monogamy could potentially not benefit you or be right for you? And I think this is an important question to ask yourself, because for a lot of people, there are a lot of fears and anxieties and doubts and concerns, that come up. And whether or not, however much weight you want to kind of put into each of those parts that kind of come up for you, I think it's really valuable to kind of acknowledge that they're there, and not just kind of in a fear-based place, but just of like really making sure that you acknowledge those parts that just like, I just don't think this is for me. This doesn't feel right for me. Is there a way to set boundaries up in the process? In answering some of these, I found myself in an unknown grayish space, and I'm wondering how to navigate it without feeling overwhelmed. Yeah, absolutely. It can be very overwhelming. First of all, it's like, where do we even begin? There's so much to consider, but especially like you said, where there's oftentimes a lot of gray parts, a lot of in between, of like, well, I'm not necessarily over here and I'm not necessarily over here. I'm kind of like here. What do I do with that? Or even a lot of like, I don't know, for a lot of these questions, all of your answers might be, I don't know. And again, these questions can probably feel overwhelming because I'm giving them to you all at once. But I think it's okay if they're gray, and it's okay if you don't know. Like, that is the beauty of all of this, right? Especially it can especially feel that way if, and I'm not making this assumption for you, but especially if maybe this is kind of the first time that you've really asked yourself these questions, that you really like began to think about, well, what is it that I want? Who really am I in my relationships? Like, how do I want to show up in my relationships? What do I want possible in my relationships? And what I want to make space for. Like, it can be overwhelming, especially if you're kind of just starting out. But if it's just a matter of like, well, I'm not really sure where I land, I'm kind of here, I'm kind of there, like, that's okay too. And maybe part of that grayish area is because maybe there's not a lot of experience with something. And so these questions are just meant to kind of begin the kind of the starting point, kind of like thinking about and expanding our conversation with ourselves about relationships and about non-monogamy. But at some point, you're gonna, I don't know, you're gonna open yourself up. You're gonna start to meet people. You're gonna, start to, I don't know, feel drawn to maybe a particular piece of media that you might have found, online about something, or you might meet somebody and, it's like you're starting to kind of open yourself up to it. And when you do that, you're going to start to it's going to pop up, and when it pops up, then that's an opportunity to kind of get that experience, whether again, it's direct experience because you're meeting people and, you have a relationship and you're starting to open it up, or just indirectly through hearing other people's stories where things are going to start to kind of feel interesting to you. And I think that's all you need. Like, you just need that little bit of desire, that little bit of interest, that little bit of curiosity, and then taking a little baby step towards that to feel it out. Setting up your boundaries can be really helpful with that, absolutely. Sometimes we don't know what we want, but it might be easier to know what we don't want. And that's where you can, start out. You absolutely know that you don't want this. Those can be your boundaries. That can be your starting point. And those things will change. So let me know if I answered your question, or if you might need a little bit more on that. All right, I'm gonna move along. Oops, what's going on? Move along with the questions. What do you imagine would be your biggest challenges in non-monogamy? Again, kind of speaking to maybe some of those fears that might come up for you, or doubts, or like, I'm not really sure if this is for me or not. Like, start to kind of welcome those things in and know them, and, at least acknowledge that they're there. How do you feel non-monogamy could benefit you or be right for you? So expanding, stretching your brain a little bit to think like, how could this be beneficial to you based on the things that I want and I desire and who I am? Like, what could be the positives here? What could be the things that could be good for me here? And then what interests, and I kind of put this at the end. I had it at the beginning, I moved it all the way to the end because I think all of these questions kind of get things warmed up for us and bring feelings and thoughts and, whatnot in our bodies, in our minds. But I think with that, then hopefully maybe you can start to pull out from there, like what interests you about non-monogamy, or what might spark joy for you in non-monogamy. And that could be a starting point for, exploring. That could be a starting point for, I don't know, just kind of honing in on and getting to kind of figure it out for yourself. Okay, so I just want to make sure that I had time. I kind of sped through that more than I wanted to, but I want to make sure that I have some time to answer some more questions, or to share this information with you here. I have an Instagram page where I share a lot of information, not just information, but experiences, reflections, and just a lot of my own personal stuff on non-monogamy. I'm an advocate. I'm not necessarily just an educator, but also an advocate for non-monogamy, and really an advocate for love, an advocate for expanding our ideas about intimacy and relationships, and that being whatever you want it to look like, at least connecting to the idea that it's possible. And let's see, what else? I wanted to kind of give at least 2 minutes. If anybody wants to share any of their responses, I totally understand if you don't, but if there's like any question that kind of stood out to you, for whatever reason, and you jotted down an answer, if you're open to sharing that, please do in the chat section before we go. I understand I threw a lot of questions at once to you, and I actually have more, and some of them are kind of more around the details of non-monogamy. So if anybody is interested in receiving more of those questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share them with you. If you have any questions, curiosities, or feedback with what I shared with you today, please reach out to me. I'm happy to make myself available to connect more personally around this. What else? There's a event that's coming up that I am co-hosting, and it's called Visions of Non-Monogamy, and it is an event where we're going to use art, and and not just art, but just you're going to bring any kind of materials that you have in your home that you can get creative with, and we're going to create some vision boards, and it's going to be a guided experience where we come together virtually and create a vision board or some kind of visual representation of your ideal relationship or your ideal non-monogamy and even your ideal monogamy. So everybody is invited. And let's see what else. Also, let's see, I wanted to share, if I can get out of here, stop sharing. I wanted to share a link with you of some of the resources that I enjoy that it could be helpful to you. You should just be able to download it. If you have any issues with it, let me know, but just going to share it here with you. And those are, you can find some resources to kind of help you explore non-monogamy a little bit. So, all right, I think that is it. If, again, you have any questions, curiosities, feedback, if you loved any of the questions and want some more, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to share more with you and just connect with you on this. So that's all I got.